Live with Matt. Hey, a lot of times, many of us that have read the Bible have heard the story of the prodigal son. And perhaps you've heard about how great of a story of redemption it is about someone who walked away from the father and then came back, or how great of a story it is from the father's perspective that he forgave this son. But today we're going to talk about a few perspectives that you may not have looked at in the story of the prodigal son or the compassionate father. We're going to talk about the perspective of the older brother and those that watched this messed up family. So let's get started. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in live, Bible Study Live with Matt. I'm Matt, and I'm so glad that you are joining me this morning. Hey, before I get started, look, if you want to get an advanced copy of our new marriage book, you can text the word love to 833-981-0002, standard messaging and data rate supply. But I think it'll help with your marriage, your life, and everything else. So, anyways, without further ado, I want to dig in on this story of the prodigal son, the compassionate father, if you will. So we're going to dig in on that. I'm going to open up the chat so I can see if you're messaging. Wherever you're watching from, feel free to drop a comment in, and I'd love to reply to you. So I should be able to see them from if you're watching on Twitch, if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're watching on the Be Salt and Light Facebook page. I'll be able to see your comments and reply to them right here on the screen. But if you're watching on LinkedIn or just my regular Facebook page, I should be able to see your comment, but I may not be able to reply to it in the chat. So trying to give you guys a heads up on that. All right. Without further ado, let's dig in on this story. So I'm going to give you a brief recap of the story really quick, and then we'll dig in on it. So if you've never heard the story of the prodigal son, here's basically the story in a nutshell. A dad has two sons, an older one and a younger one, obviously, because there's only two. The younger son comes to dad and says, "Hey, I want my stuff. I want what's coming to me. I want my inheritance. Give it to me now." Which essentially is the younger son saying to the dad, "Hey, you're dead to me. Give me my stuff. I want to bounce." So the dad doesn't give him any grief over it. He says, "Okay," gives him his stuff. The kid takes off. Well, what we learn from the rest of the story: kid blows all his money, squanders it on what's quoted as wild living. He comes back. The dad sees him from a long way off, runs across the field. "Yay, my son's back. Let's throw a barbecue." They have a barbecue. The older son's outside sulking. The dad says, "What's up?" He says, "Look, I've been here doing all the right things, serving you my whole life. You haven't given me and my buddies even as much as a goat. But now this son of yours who went and wasted all of his inheritance on prostitutes and living wild comes back and you throw a celebration. Not fair. I'm angry." Meh. And the dad says to him, "Listen, everything that I have has always been yours. Uh, but your brother, he was gone. We thought he was dead, and now we know he's alive. Thought he was lost. Now he's found. This is a reason to celebrate." So that's the whole story in a nutshell. But a lot of times we can relate when we get to know God, Jesus. We can relate to being in the position of the son, the prodigal, right? Because we're like, okay, my whole life I've been living apart from God. Now I'm here. He's welcome to me. He loves me. Wow, yay! I feel redeemed. We can relate with that. Many of us can. Some of us, we've had a relationship restored. Maybe we've had a child, a friend, somebody who burned us, left, and came back, and that relationship has been restored. So we can relate to that loving dad. But there are a couple other characters in the story that I want to focus on today, and that is the older brother and also the people watching this unfold, because these are equal parts of the story that are important. So let's read the part of the story where the older brother comes in. All right, so son comes back. He's trying to tell his father how he screwed up. The dad wasn't listening. "Hey, bring the prize calf, clean set of clothes. We're gonna have a cookout." Uh, all this time, the older son was out in the field. When the day's work was done, he came in. As he approached the house, he heard the music and dancing. Calling over one of the houseboys, he asked, "What's going on?" He told him, "Your brother came home. Your father ordered a feast, barbecue beef, because he has him home safe and sound." I love the way the message translates that. Barbecue beef cookout. The older brother stomped off in an angry sulk and refused to join in. His father came out and tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. The son said, "Look at how many years I've stayed here serving you, never giving you one moment of grief. But have you ever thrown a party for me and my friends? Then this son of yours who threw away your money on whores shows up and you go all out with a feast. His father says, don't you understand? You're with me all the time and everything that's mine is yours. But this is a wonderful time and we had to celebrate. This brother of yours was dead and he's alive. He was lost and he's found. How in the heck does this relate to us in 2022? What does this even mean? What is the lesson here? Well, there's a couple things that are going on. Okay. Number one, let's look at it from this perspective. You might say, well, I don't relate to the older son. Like, I don't get how that's a story that's a modern deal, right? If somebody comes to Jesus, I'm happy. Well, here's how this relates. Have you ever been at a moment in your life where somebody who's just been a butthole, they've been a jerk, you've seen it, you've seen them wrong people, you've seen them screw stuff up, then all of a sudden they like this, oh, overnight their life changed, and you've been like, I'll believe life change happens when I see it. Or have you ever seen somebody who's made mistakes and then they've just seem to have been blessed so much by God? Like they are just out there doing all the wrong things, making all the wrong choices. Just they're left and right. They look nothing like what you think somebody should look like if they're walking with God. And then yet you keep seeing blessings happen and you're like, but they don't deserve that. I've been going to church every week. I've been going to my Wednesday night worship services. I've been doing all the right Christian things. Why isn't God blessing me like he's blessing them? I'm so frustrated because I've been doing it all. But I didn't get some windfall. I didn't win the lotto. You know, this person has been living wrong their whole life. They become a believer, and then 2 seconds later, all of a sudden, like, oh, they get this promotion. They happen to hit the lottery. Like, what's going on, God? Like, why not me? See, that's how we can relate to the older son. Because I got to tell you, there have been times where I have been like that. I've seen people talking to God talk, but I've known them, and I've known that they've just kind of pooped all over the lifestyle. Right? They like use God to make a buck, but that's not how they're living. And I get frustrated. I'm like, God, why are you blessing that? But here's the crazy deal. Jesus is telling this story for a specific reason to a specific group of people. So I want to show you here what's going on. Because if we back up to the beginning of chapter 15, it says, by this time, a lot of men and women of questionable reputation were hanging around Jesus, listening intently. So we let men and women of questionable reputation are hearing the stories that Jesus is about to tell. It also says the Pharisees and religion scholars weren't pleased and they growled. He takes in sinners and he meals with them, which means so we've got people who aren't God follower, that are living, wrong, right? Living a crap life, probably living a life squandering it with prostitutes. Just like the younger son. So Jesus is talking, and there's a group of people there who are living like the younger son. Then there are the Pharisees that are watching, and then there's also Jesus' Talmudim, the disciples, the 12, the close to him, the true like followers that are tight. So in this audience listening to the stories, we've got people living like the younger son. We've got people being like the older brother, the Pharisees, who are keeping all the rules and things like that, but their heart isn't right toward those who need God. And then we've got all the observers too, right? So we've got some people that are observing. We don't know where they're at in their faith journey, whatever. But we've got the disciples. We'll consider the disciples also the observers because like they're following Jesus. They're learners. They're students, right? And so in this story, what we learn is like Jesus seems to be telling a story to each of them. Some of you are being like the son. Some of you over here, the quote unquote people living a questionable life. It's like Jesus is saying, there's some of you that need to come running back to the Father. And he's like, maybe saying to the Pharisees, hey, and you guys need to be grateful when these people that you're angry about, the ones you're grumbling about, the fact that they're here trying to learn about God, trying to connect and be redeemed, that should be worth celebrating, Pharisees. But the interesting thing that we miss maybe sometimes in the story is that how we live out our part in this story, because this could just be a metaphor that Jesus is talking about. Maybe it's a real story, maybe it's just a metaphor that he's trying to give an example for them to embrace. But here's what we can learn. See, as Jesus is telling this story, how we respond to him will make a difference in our ability to make disciples. See, because as people are hearing this story, they're seeing a story of a father who was grateful to see a son want to be close to him and want to be redeemed. But we see an older brother who's close to the father already has. And by the way, in that culture, the older brother was called the Behor, which the Behor meant um, they would get a double. The firstborn would get a double portion of the inheritance. So the younger son got his portion, which was really a third, because if there were two sons, basically the inheritance divided into thirds. Older brother gets 2/3, younger brother gets 1/3. It's just how the culture was. Like it or not, don't get angry. I didn't make it up. So the younger brother took his 1/3, but the older brother, there's so many reasons why his reaction is frustrating. Reason number one, he's not even grateful that his brother came back home. But reason number two is the older brother didn't realize the whole time. Yes, he stayed there living with the father. Yes, he's walked the walk, which has given him access to everything the father has. He's had access to everything the father has all along because he's been walking with his father. But on top of that, he's got a double portion of what the younger brother had in the first place. So it seems to paint a picture like, why aren't you grateful for what you have? But you know what I love about this is that the father doesn't reprimand him and say, why aren't you grateful for what you have, dude? You've always had a double portion coming to you, and you've always had what I have. Instead, notice the way the father communicates. It's a heart of compassion where he says to his older son, son, you don't understand. You're with me all the time, and everything that's mine is yours. Like to the older son, all right, you want to focus on you? Let's focus on you. Son, nothing's ever been taken away from you. Everything I have is yours. Someone's like saying to him, if you had ever wanted to throw a party with the fattened calf, you could have, because what's mine is yours. Like everything that I have is yours. You're my firstborn. You've always had it coming to you. And understanding in the culture that the Jewish people, they were God's chosen, his firstborn. Oh, now the story starts to paint a different picture. That'll preach. See, the Jewish people are God's firstborn. They were the ones to bring God's grace and love to the Gentiles. The prodigal who ran away represents those of us who are apart from God, who have chosen a life away from God. And so as we see the father is telling the firstborn, you should be grateful and excited that these younger ones who weren't with me are now with me. Man, that's beautiful because the father didn't condemn the son who ran away. It's like he forgave him before he ever left. But he also doesn't condemn the older son who got it wrong. He shows just as much love and grace to that older son. Now, why does that matter? And I'm going to land the plane with this morning. Because sometimes we felt like the younger son. Sometimes we have felt like the father giving grace to someone. And sometimes, if we look hard enough in the mirror, we're going to realize that we can relate to that older son. But how many of us could also relate to the people watching this going, what a jacked up family, right? Like how many people look at us Christians and they go, man, what a mess this family is, right? They're all supposed to be one. They're all supposed to be a family of God. And how jacked up are they? They don't even forgive each other. They don't show grace to each other. They're not kind to each other. Like, come on, if we're being honest, there are a lot of times we just don't represent God well at all. Sometimes we just suck at it, right? And here's the beautiful thing that when we are like that older brother and we suck at it and people are watching, the good news is God gives us grace and he gives us an opportunity. And in a moment, we can change and say, I'm going to choose to be like this father in the story. And I want I want you to get the overarching message of this whole story. Here's what the overarching message is. Relationships matter to God. So much so that we are supposed to drop everything to make them right. Don't believe me? Look at the book of Genesis, chapter 2, when God had been walking with Adam in the garden. Yet, God looks at Adam and says, it's not good for him to be alone. Well, he's not alone. He's been with God. According to God, that's still too alone for him. He needed a human being. He needed people in his life, people like him, imperfect people, but he needed them. Adam needed him, and so do we. And if you don't believe me that that's the point of this story, let me back the story up. Beginning of Luke chapter 15. First story that Jesus tells is about a lost sheep. Okay. Look at this. Very short story. If you had 100 sheep and one of them walked off, you'd leave because your livestock is important to you. Then he says, imagine you had 10 coins and you lose one. Like if you found that coin, you'd throw a party. If you found that sheep, you'd throw a party. two very short things that people could relate to. Man, if your livestock is your livelihood, right? You need your livestock. You need your basically Jesus is saying, your livelihood, your stuff is important to you. So important that if you were to lose it, but then you were to get it back, you would be like, celebrate, let's celebrate, let's celebrate. But let me tell you how you've been treating people. See, people get lost. And when they come back, you don't celebrate them. When they come home to the Father, you get upset that they're even allowed in the house. Friends, none of us perfect. We've all had moments where we've been the older brother in the story. And this isn't the first time we've seen stuff like this in the Bible. If you look at the story of Jonah, he didn't want to go to Nineveh because he knew that God would redeem them if they turned from their ways. And they did turn. And he did redeem them. And the story doesn't end with Jonah going, yay, like it does in the kids' books. It ends with Jonah, like the other brother, going off to sulk. I knew you would redeem them, God. I knew you'd forgive them if they asked. And Jonah was so mad that when people turned to God, God showed him grace. Friends, we are called to make disciples, not called to be judges. We're not called to be upset when someone who's been living, I don't care if they have lived 45 years of their life as a giant flaming dumpster fire of garbage and mistreating people, lying to people, stealing from people, abusing people, misusing people. If they've done all of that, it is horrible. But if they turn to God and recognize and say, I've got to start living for God, I've got to stop living this way, we should celebrate in that moment. Because all the damage they've been doing and that they've done, it ends that day. That day now, not only are they redeeming their own life and restoring their own life, but they've stopped destroying other lives. See, when someone comes home to God, we should all be celebrating. My boy Jeremy said this last night at church, and he said it before, and I love it. It's a great reminder. He said, you know, the church, us, we're supposed to be a hospital for the sick, uh, not a not a not a school for the saints. I don't know how he referred to the second half, but you know, being the body of Christ, we're supposed to be a place that is there to love on and serve and help. Right in the scriptures, Jesus said, "It's the sick who need a doctor." We're supposed to be that place of refuge for people who say, I'm struggling. I need to turn that corner. I turn my life around. The question is, do you actually want to be that? Do you want to be that for someone? Because God is calling you and I to partner with him in the redemption story, to help people come to know him and understand how loved they are, how forgiven they are, how redeemed they are. Not to remind them of how horrible they were and how broken they were and how destructive they were. Listen, have you ever screwed up in your life? I have. You know what I don't need? Someone to remind me of how big of a piece of crap I was a few years ago. That's not going to do anything to help redeem me in becoming a better person. I know my faults and failures. I know my sins. I know where I've fallen short, and I know where I continue to fall short. And you whacking me in the head with a reminder of how not great I am, well, do you think that's going to help me step closer to God? Or do you think that's going to help me go, I mean, why am I doing this anyway? I mean, as much as I'm trying to change, it doesn't seem like anyone cares. We have a choice. God calls us to partner with him in love, redemption, and forgiveness. Can I encourage you today? There's hope. When we choose to be like the Father, the compassionate Father, when we choose to show that love and redemption, when we choose to do that, not only does it help the person who is redeemed, but do you know that everybody watching, it helps them get a better picture of God? Because instead of them going, look at all these hypocrite Christians that talk about love and forgiveness but don't give it, it helps the other people see and go, man, in spite of how broken and messed up, because they're humans and they're people, these Christians aren't perfect, but man, you know what they're doing well? They're trying their best to love people. They're trying their best to redeem people. And when people see that, they say, I don't get these crazy Christians. I don't get them. They're nuts. But you know what? I got to understand why they're nuts. I got to understand why they're doing this. I got to figure this out, because for some reason in spite of the craziness going on in the world, in spite of the war and the nuts and the fighting and everything. Man, this group of people over here sure seems to be loving on people anyway. Why are they being so nice to people that are not being cool to them? Why are they showing love to people that are burning them? And that's what we want to be. We want to be a curiosity that causes someone to say, I've got to know more. Question is, will you be that? Will you be willing to do that? I don't do it perfectly, but I'm willing to try real hard. And I want to invite you to try real hard with me. Let's make God's love our mission. Let's show people what that looks like. Speaking of love, look, my wife and I have a new book coming out next month called For This Reason, How to Live in Ephesians 5 Marriage. If you're single and you're thinking about maybe one day you'd like to be married, this could be a great book for you. If you're married, but your marriage has kind of hit some roadblocks, this would be a great book for you. If you're divorced, my wife and I have been married twice before each. Like, we've done it wrong twice. Trust me, you want to avoid the failures, we've got a perfect roadmap of how to fail. And we take that into account. But what's better is if you want to know how to succeed in marriage, the scriptures have some great words on that. And we take those and break them down on what they mean in the context of marriage today and how that looks for us and how it could look for you too. If you want to know more, you can get an advanced copy of our book. You can text the word love to 833-981-0002. We're going to hook you up with an advanced copy for a couple of reasons. One, we want feedback. We need reviews. We need great reviews for when we publish it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and where all good books are sold. We want good book reviews. But more importantly, we want to get it in the hands of people as soon as possible to help them really work on restoration in their marriage. Relationships matter to God, and they matter to us, and they should matter to you too. So hook yourself up. Text the word love to 833-981-0002. As always, standard messaging and data rates apply when texting. I have to say that stuff because that's legal stuff. There you go. No matter where you're at in your relationship, in your life, you're just one moment away from walking just a little bit closer with God. And this could be your moment. So let me encourage you to take advantage of it. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you tomorrow.